The acrid smell of burnt rice clung to the kitchen when the storm finally broke. I dragged myself home, worn down from an endless day, craving peace. Instead, my wife's rage greeted me like a slap to the face. "You're a loser, a nobody who can't hold a job," she hissed, her words sharp, cutting through the air. Before I could answer, she grabbed a kettle, its steaming contents flung at me. The scalding liquid seared my arm, forcing me back in shock, not just from pain, but from her venom, her betrayal. As I tried to process it, she shoved me toward the door, her voice dripping contempt. "Get out of my house, and don't ever come back." Her sister lounged on the couch, smirking as if my suffering were a private performance for her amusement. I cast one final glance at my wife, her expression smug, triumphant, and said nothing. No shouting, no accusations, only a quiet determination. Then I walked away. She thought she'd driven out a worthless man. She had no idea I was quietly earning $70,000 a month. By morning, her world would collapse. That night, I left with only my wallet and phone. No luggage, no spare clothes, no sign of anger. The burn on my arm throbbed, but the deeper wound was her conviction that I was nothing, a parasite barely surviving, unworthy of her home. She had no clue I had hidden my wealth, my income, my investments, my accounts, all shielded from her grasp. Every month, $70,000 flowed into my accounts from a business I had quietly built over years. I never flaunted it, choosing humility partly for convenience, partly to see whether her love was for me or my money. Now I had my answer. Instead of retreating to some shabby motel, as she likely imagined, I drove to the city's heart and met my lawyer. I placed a house deed on his desk. "It's mine, right?" I asked. He reviewed it, a slight smile tugging at his lips. "Every inch," he confirmed. "She has no claim. Want to move fast." I nodded. By dawn, as she slept smug in her imagined victory, legal documents were filed, accounts were frozen, and new locks were being installed. Her castle was crumbling, and she had no idea. She thought she'd evicted a beggar. By sunrise, she learned she'd ousted the owner. The first light of morning barely stirred when her delusion began to unravel. She woke, still basking in the belief she had freed herself from a failure. But when she tried her key in the front door to fetch the newspaper, it wouldn't turn. She twisted it harder, baffled, but the lock held firm. Confused, she went a back door, only to see a brand new lock on the front, with a locksmith's notice taped to it. Work completed per owner's instructions. Her face drained of color. On the dining table, delivered overnight by courier, lay a thick legal envelope. She tore it open, expecting a trivial matter, but inside was the truth, an eviction notice, effective immediately, declaring she had no right to remain. Copies of the deed proved the house was mine alone, inherited and fully paid for long before she entered my life. Divorce papers followed, citing her abuse and supported by medical records of the burn on my arm. Each line cut deeper than any insult she had thrown. She screamed, waking her sister. They rushed to the driveway to escape, only to spot my car parked across the street. I sat behind the wheel, window down, watching as realization hit. I didn't shout. I didn't gloat. I lifted my phone and snapped a picture of her clutching the eviction notice, her sister stunned beside her, then drove away. She had thought she had expelled a nobody, but by morning, she stood outside my house, her nightmare only beginning. By noon, her private arrogance had become a public spectacle. She couldn't flee. The locksmith returned, accompanied by officers to enforce the property transfer. She and her sister yelled, brandishing the eviction notice, but the officers were unmoved. "Ma'am, the deed is his. You're trespassing. Leave now." Neighbors peeked from windows, some stepping into their yards. The same neighbor she had boasted to about ridding herself of a useless husband now watched her escorted off the property. Murmurs spread. Phones recorded the scene. By nightfall, the story had spread through the community. She tried to salvage dignity, storming to her car and vowing to go shopping, but at the first store, her card was declined. Every account linked to my name was frozen. The lavish lifestyle she'd taken for granted, spa visits, shopping sprees, extravagant lunches, vanished instantly. Her sister, who had chuckled as I was thrown out, turned on her in an instant. You said the house was yours. You had everything. I gave up my place for you. Their bitter argument echoed across the parking lot. Captured by onlookers, the ally she had relied on now tore her apart. She had mocked me as a failure, demanded I leave, and assumed the house was hers. By day's end, she had no home, no money, and no supporters. Her private scorn had become public humiliation. If the social disgrace shook her, the legal onslaught obliterated her. While she raged and scrambled for funds, my attorney filed papers downtown, assault charges with boiling water, divorce citing cruelty, and freezes on every account she accessed. By the time she realized the scope, a court summons arrived at her mother's house in front of her family. In court, she tried her usual lies. He's broke, a parasite. I supported him for years. But my lawyer presented bank statements showing my $70,000 monthly income, along with investments, savings, and properties, all carefully documented and untouchable. The judge's eyes widened with each page. Her claim of being the provider crumbled. When photos of my burn, backed by medical records, were presented, sympathy shifted completely. The ruling was swift. Full ownership of the house went to me. She was barred from entry, no alimony granted due to her abuse, restraining orders issued from the assault charge, and financial penalties drained her sparse savings. Her composure shattered as justice struck. The arrogance she had worn like armor was stripped away, leaving only shame. She had mocked me as a failure, burned me, and cast me out, but in court, she was the one pleading. The courtroom victory closed the battle. Her choices reverberated long after. What she had seen as triumph, evicting me, ridiculing me, bragging to her family, became her downfall. Financially, she was cut off, with no alimony or property. The luxury she flaunted disappeared overnight. Socially, friends and neighbors whispered about her collapse. Her sister, once her ally, blamed her for tarnishing the family name, leaving her isolated. Her arrogance, once her shield, became loneliness and regret. For me, peace came not just from justice, but renewal. I transformed the house into a sanctuary. I poured energy into my business, each deal a reminder that patience and silence outlast rage. My $70,000 monthly income was more than wealth. It was proof of underestimated power, of quiet resolve. That night, she had screamed, "Useless drifters don't belong here. Leave and never return." But in the end, she was the one pleading. For keys she never owned, for money she never earned, for dignity she threw away with a splash of boiling water. I never raised my voice. I only raised the truth. Years later, time punished her in ways no court could. Financial ruin forced menial jobs. The opulence she once flaunted faded to memory. Socially, she was a pariah. Whispers followed her everywhere. Her family, ashamed, kept their distance. Her arrogance isolated her completely. Meanwhile, I thrived. My business expanded. My $70,000 monthly income grew through smart investments. The house became a symbol of resilience, its walls glowing with calm. I learned that silence cuts deeper than shouts. She screamed. I spoke softly, and the world heard the whisper. Years later, as people passed my home, successful, calm, respected, while she grew weary and bitter, the truth was clear. I was never the drifter. She was the one begging, for wealth, for respect, for a chance to undo mistakes. I never offered that chance. Was my response justified? Share your thoughts below. If the story of betrayal and justice resonates, pass it on and stay tuned for more tales where lies meet reckoning, and every betrayal casts a long shadow.